I am not a financial advisor, and I never give financial advice on this channel. 100% of this content is for entertainment purposes only. Hello everybody, hope you're all doing well. It's Lane here with MetaShackle. I've just been looking over the charts today, thinking about a couple of different things, thinking about potential for one way or the other as far as the movement is concerned. I don't normally watch a bunch of technical analysis on YouTube because it tends to sway my opinion, but today I was watching some videos and some clips from videos, and it seems like a lot of people have been looking at this head and shoulders pattern that's forming on Bitcoin, and a lot of people are leaning to the bearish side. And that really got me thinking, because the 90% is wrong most of the time. And granted, I have been expecting a liquidity draw down into the lower levels for quite some time, going back to March. And although we have hit some lower levels, we haven't gone anywhere near, especially recently, to the levels that I and many of my Patreon members have been expecting. And even though we had this big drop in the last day or so, perhaps the bottom is in, especially when you think about it in terms of Bitcoin, which has been leading the market and is still very strong when you look at the charts overall. But a lot of people are looking at this head and shoulders pattern and leaning heavily bearish, which really starts to make me think the exact opposite direction, because I've believed for quite some time now that even though it is showing a head and shoulders pattern on Bitcoin right now, I've believed that the cup and handle pattern is actually going to be the pattern that plays out, taking Bitcoin to the upside, setting a new all-time high, and moving somewhere into that range of 119 to about 123,000, perhaps even higher. So let's not waste any more time and let's get into these charts. So if we look at the liquidity heat map on Bitcoin, this is the 1 month, I find it very interesting that when the price came down here just recently, that it left the heaviest concentration of liquidity on the entire chart, just left it sitting there. Price has pulled up to the upper range here where there's been very sparse liquidity all the way up. There is quite a bit of liquidity up in this band here and this band here, going all the way up to about that 113,700 level. Now, why would the algorithm or the market makers, in the event that it was under manual intervention at the time, why would they have left this band of liquidity here? Unless they were planning a fake out to the downside. There's no way that they would have left this here unless they had plans. Because if they drive the price down to this level, they need this liquidity to move back up again. And they've clearly left this here on purpose. This thickest band goes down to about that, I would say down here to about that 99,700 level. Now this doesn't make sense. Now taking a look at the Bitcoin chart, this is the 4-hour chart. You can see that the head and shoulders pattern I'm talking about that most analysts are referring to is right here. Left shoulder, the head, forming this right shoulder. A lot of times these patterns will come back up, do a retest off of this area before following through and collapsing to lower ranges. Now we also have the cup and handle pattern that I've been referring to right here, with the rim line being this purple line right here on my charts, which you can clearly see, which is marked cup and handle right here. Subsequently, there is a bearish order block on the daily sitting right below the rim line, as well as a bearish order block on the 4-hour. Well, why would those order blocks be there? Why are they trying to block price from going up and breaking out of this range? Now, the equilibrium zone is sitting right here with the equilibrium line at 106,137. Price came down into this big drop right here, and we now know that there's a ton of liquidity right here, the sharpest concentration right here within this bullish fair value gap known as a BISI on the 4-hour. So why did it leave that liquidity there? Price is now trading up into the equilibrium zone, very close to the equilibrium line, even though it hasn't quite got there yet. Now, what are the odds that the reason why they left this liquidity is because they're planning on doing a fake out to the downside, sparking the long positions to sell, and instead of continuing downwards, clearing this lower liquidity, sweeping this previous low right here, then reversing to the upside? Well, if that was the case, what we would end up with is a pattern that would be very close to an inverse head and shoulders pattern. Now, whether it came down to this area here, filling this bearish fair value gap centered at about 102,943, as well as this smaller one here that is centered right on my fib level at 102,324, there is a chance this could come down, reverse up into here, and then take off. But if the price came down and swept this low, what we would end up with would be something to this effect right here, filling this bullish fair value gap, moving into a reversal to the upside. If you look at the overall pattern that we've seen here, with the all-time high being here, we now have a nice wedge pattern forming overall. So essentially, if price came down, took that lower liquidity and reversed back up through here, broke through the equilibrium zone, got up on top of the upper trend line, it could then challenge these bearish order blocks here and here, and if it gets through those, break out of this cup and handle line right here, moving to the upside, which it would likely get rejected at this bearish order block on the first attempt, falling back down to retest the rim line, then breaking out from that point, cracking on all of that buy-side liquidity that we just saw on the heat map. And the entire time this happened, it would be faking out the longs, causing a panic sell with a fake out to the downside. And by looking at this chart and the equidistance from this half of the inverted head and shoulders to this half, we could roughly estimate that somewhere around Tuesday, perhaps Wednesday, we could see something like that moving down to the downside. And I think a lot of the people who follow a lot of the people on YouTube are thinking about this head and shoulders pattern, thinking to the bearish side, because all of us want to see a discount price so that we can get more coins at a lower price. But let's just face the fact, that has not been happening. Short of what we saw right here on the 5th, it just has not been happening. And if you think about that lower liquidity pool down here, this would be the perfect time to do a massive fake out to the downside, get everybody to sell, take all of the stop losses, liquidate all the leverage traders, reverse the price, shoot it right back up just as quick as it came down, break through the equilibrium zone, and basically leave everyone in the dust as we see the real breakout. Everybody told me I was crazy 3 or 4 weeks ago when I was talking about this cup and handle pattern right here forming. As we were hitting the all-time high here, I was saying it's very likely it's going to fall down in here and form a handle. Most people just wouldn't have it. They didn't want to hear it. Yet if you look at the chart right now, that is exactly what happened. We fell down in and have been forming this handle ever since. We saw the ZBCN cup and handle break out and go to incredible levels. We then saw the Quant cup and handle breakout going to awesome levels. And I do believe that we are now going to see the Bitcoin cup and handle breakout, moving up to some incredible levels as well. And happening at a time where most people are focused on the bearish pattern on the charts of this head and shoulders pattern right here, when it's very likely that what we're going to see is a fake out, a capture of this lower sell side liquidity, followed by a sharp move to the upside, leaving every bearish player in the dust, setting a new all-time high and coming up to a minimum of about that 119,000 to that 123,000 range, somewhere up in here. If price breaks out above this rim line, retests, we will officially be in no man's land. So determining where this is going to hit will be a matter of watching the price action, play by play by play, in order to try and determine where those levels are going to be. At this point, it's almost impossible to say because price has never traded past this point right here in Bitcoin's history. There's no previous price action to look at, and anything outside of that would literally just be a guess. But I am thinking about that 119 to 123,000 area. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we are starting to form an inverse head and shoulders right here on the chart. While everybody's watching the head and shoulders pattern getting bearish, looking to the downside, we have a huge multi-month cup and handle pattern forming And now we have an inverse head and shoulders forming with the telltale sign of liquidity resting down right here that for whatever reason was intentionally left behind either by the algorithm or by the market makers and the institutions themselves. And odds are they're going to come for that liquidity. And you saw how everybody flipped bearish and had a panic attack when this drop happened on the 5th. Just imagine now that everybody's expecting a move to the downside, what kind of a reaction we would get, especially heading down towards this low. Now, I would assume that if we do move to the downside and this fake out occurs, it's either going to happen somewhere in the range of these two bearish fair value gaps, or we could see something like this coming down here, sweeping this previous low right here, taking that liquidity, then seeing a sharp reversal to the upside, breaking out of this pattern and heading towards these bearish order blocks right here on the 4-hour chart. So that's just something to think about. But at this point, that's what I think is going to happen. For additional information and exclusive perks, do consider joining me on Patreon. Now, taking a look at the XRP heat map, the thing that we find very interesting on this, which is also the monthly, the same chart we looked at on Bitcoin, that the liquidity on this chart is very sparse down in this area. But if you look to the upside, most of the liquidity is resting above these previous highs in the form of buy-side liquidity, going all the way up to this high right here that's right around that 265 area. Now, the market makers know that Bitcoin is going to run the market, so that's why they likely left the highest concentration of liquidity below the previous low, which swept the entire pattern, by the way, completely wiping all of the sell-side liquidity with the exception of that band we were looking at. But we see a different story here on the XRP charts. So wouldn't it make sense that if Bitcoin comes down, it clears out that liquidity pool, makes a sharp move to the upside, that XRP, having sparse liquidity on the charts at this point, wouldn't XRP just follow it to the upside and start chewing on all of this buy-side liquidity? Because if Bitcoin starts to make a move like that, a large chunk of the other cryptocurrencies are just going to follow it by default. And the chart we see here seems to indicate that XRP would basically benefit more on the monthly chart by heading to the upside. Now, when we take a look at the XRP chart itself, this is also the 4-hour chart. We don't see quite the same pattern as XRP is considerably weaker. And in order to form an inverse head and shoulders pattern on this chart, we would need XRP to come up at least somewhere in this range to actually give us a viable pattern. And this left shoulder is coming down very close to the head area, and it's not the best looking pattern overall. But needless to say, if Bitcoin starts to rise, XRP is going with it. And everybody in the XRP community, including myself and many of my Patreon members, have been expecting for quite some time to see the price fall down somewhere into this liquidity zone, which just time after time after time does not seem to want to occur. Now, what are the odds that if Bitcoin makes this move that we'll see something very similar with XRP, moving to the downside, coming down somewhere in this range, perhaps tapping right here into this liquidity zone, somewhere at around that $2.03 level, breaking this bullish order block in the process, as well as these bearish SIBIs here and here, both on the 4-hour chart, before reversing to the upside and following Bitcoin. The equilibrium zone is considerably higher on the XRP chart than it is on the Bitcoin chart. So if Bitcoin breaks through the equilibrium zone, breaks out of the rim line of the cup and handle, moves to the upside, it's very likely that XRP would just get dragged through these order blocks, gaining momentum into the liquidity zone, and that would give us the strength that we need to start taking out these roadblocks, which pose an incredible force, level after 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 level, breaking through our biggest roadblock right here, getting up on top of it right around that $2.50 range, taking out this previous high, and perhaps moving up and challenging the all-time high that was set during the Trump election pump earlier this year right here on January 16th, sitting right about that in that 340 range. And in the process, faking out about 90% of us who have been thinking we were coming to see these levels here, and even having the possibility of coming down to this bullish order block centered right about that 145 level. If you think about it, this would be the perfect opportunity, because there are a lot of people that have already sold their XRP and their Bitcoin that are sitting on the sidelines right now just hoping to get in somewhere down here, and others down here. I do have my low limit buy orders set right down here at this weak doji reverse waterfall, about 50% of my buying power. And I have the other 25% sitting right here at this weak doji at about that 192.1 range with 25% in dry powder. And it really makes me wonder how many people are doing the exact same thing, which would make a perfect way of thinking why the market makers would in fact not want to take price down there, because what they would do in the process is, yes, it would take out a lot of the sell side liquidity, but at the same time they would be filling tons and tons of bags, and you know that they don't want to do that. And if they could fake this out to the downside, push everybody out, liquidating the leveraged traders, hitting stop losses of all the longs, then bouncing to the upside and leaving them behind, they would leave so many people behind in the process who would almost completely miss out on what is most likely going to be the biggest part of the bull run that we have seen so far, moving into late June, July, and possibly even August. I think it makes a lot of sense that something like this could play out. I know that's a lot to think about, but think about that liquidity that they left under the low on the Bitcoin heat map. It just doesn't make sense. Something's not adding up. The only thing that makes sense is a fake out to the downside, breaking that head and shoulders pattern, bouncing up out of the inverse head and shoulders pattern, the rim line on the cup on Bitcoin, then taking the price up into no man's land, into price discovery, way up here and leaving everybody behind. Now think how many people have been sitting here waiting on this bull run for ages, only to get faked out in the last few precious minutes, missing out on it entirely, or at least missing out on the biggest part of it. That's how market makers and institutions roll. Max pain. So thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate each and every single one of you. Please do me a favor and hit the like button. It doesn't cost you anything, and it definitely helps the channel get through the YouTube algorithm, and I would really appreciate it. This is just something to think about, but as we sit right now, I think that we're going to see a fake out to the downside and then a breakout to the upside. And those lower liquidity levels that I've been waiting for and talking about forever, they may just be off the table at this point. So thank you so much. Have a great day.